ever.
Yes. Welcome back.
Okay, so in the news this past week, we've been seeing stories about the right to die with Dignity Act, and we were fortunate enough to have Christy O'Donnell join us this morning. She is a practicing attorney. She's a retired LAPD detective. She's a single mom, and she's dying of cancer. And I don't know why. I was reading the stories last night and I was getting very emotional. What I love about Christy's story is that in her final moments, final days, that she is going to fight the good fight to leave such a strong legacy and to pave the way for other people behind her. And I'm really excited, and I'm really honored that she is joining us today on the phone. So Christy, are you with us?
Yes, good morning. Thank
Good
you
morning.
so much. Good morning to both of you. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
We are honored to have you.
Thank you, Christy.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to, correct me if I'm wrong, so you were diagnosed last year, right, with stage 4 lung cancer. Is that right?
Correct. On June 25th of last year, just a couple of days after my daughter's 20th birthday, and that we closed escrow on a house up here in Santa Clarita. I couldn't read. I woke up in the morning after her birthday and had a hard time reading. We went to the ER, and I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. So, my kid went from 20 years old to 30 years old in one day.
Oh, my gosh.
And your daughter Bailey, she lives with you. She's 20. Is she with you every step of the way during this process? And I always want to make sure our kids are taken care of. So, how's she doing?
Bailey has been with me every step of this process, from literally the emergency room to doctor's appointments. She's been with me, after chemotherapy, and we've made all major decisions about this disease jointly, as well as our decision to go ahead and speak out. So, when people tell me, that I'm so brave for speaking out, in reality, it's my daughter who's made the decision to share her last few months with her mom with the world. It's really my daughter, Bailey.
Wow. So you're one of 3 plaintiffs who, with the help of Compassion and Choices, are suing California for the right to die as you wish, on your terms.
Exactly. And what we're suing for is essentially saying, look, the California Constitution and U.S. Constitution already allows individuals such as myself to refuse all medical care, hydration, and nutrition. If the California Constitution allows us to refuse that, then likewise the same Constitution should allow us to affirmatively choose aid in dying. So that's essentially what the lawsuit is asking for, is saying, look, please don't use Penal Code Section 401 to criminally prosecute the doctors and or patients who are trying to take advantage of this just to die more quickly and more peacefully.
Well, and it seems like a more humane way than to stop treatments and stop nutrition and hydration. And at what point of your journey did you decide that this was an option for you?
Well, as soon as I was diagnosed, over the next couple of days that I was in the hospital, my daughter and I talked about it at length, and we talked about it at length because the doctors had been very candid with us about the very painful way that I would likely die with the lung cancer and the brain cancer at that point. I was either going to be trapped in my own body and unable to communicate because the brain tumor was so big, or my lungs were going to fill with fluid and I was going to drown. Wow. So I did not want my daughter to have to carry those memories with her the rest of her life, and it's very frustrating to me that the current law would try to force me to do that.
I obviously, Jack Kevorkian, was I think it's fair to say he was a kind of a pioneer,
a trailblazer
in this. And I was looking back, I think I'd forgotten that he died a couple of years ago. But if this law were to pass, would it have had any impact on Jack Kevorkian's? I think he was acquitted a couple times, but on his last, he was put in jail. Would this have had any kind of retroactive impact on what happened to him?
Well, I would say that it may not have an impact on him, and the reason is because the difference between physician-assisted suicide that Jack Kevorkian was participating in, the physician was actually administering the drug to the patient that caused them to die. Whereas aid in dying or death with dignity, whatever label you give it, the patient has to be competent enough and physically able to administer their own medication. So the sole choice of this and the power and the control of this stays with the patient themselves. So that's very distinguishable from what Jack Kevorkian was doing.
Right. And that's what I think Compassion and Choice is called. They call it the empowered patient, right? Is that kind of under that guise?
Absolutely.
And was that, I mean, you know, obviously Brittany Maynard was in the news, several months ago, when she chose
to move
to Oregon for that. And is that, did that have any effect on your choices? Like, where was the timing there? And do you think that her experience will ultimately help others who are in that same position like yourself?
Yes. Brittany Maynard, you know, she broke into the media in October when she announced via video that she and her family, her mother, Debbie, her husband, Dan, they had all had to move to Oregon to lawfully take advantage of the death with dignity law there. After she took her life in November, I mean, you know, there was a media frenzy about that. So that certainly raised awareness about aid and dying that until then had been really a topic that was in the closet.
Absolutely.
So now that the topic is more out of the closet, people are talking about this. You know, it did impact my decision, my daughter's decision, but it didn't convince me. What Brittany did didn't convince me to do or to not do this, because this isn't a fad. This is really a personal choice. It just allowed me, and it gave my daughter and I both the courage to speak out about this. You know, rather than remaining quiet and personally dealing with this disease, which is almost what everybody wants to do. You know, they don't want to spend their last days, you know, no offense, but they don't want to spend their last days doing interviews and doing things like that. They want to be with their family.
Absolutely. Right. Christy, can you stay with us for one more segment? We just have to take a quick break.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll be right back on KHTS AM 1220, your hometown station. Welcome back to Broadscast. We are talking to Christy O'Donnell, who is a local LA mom, a practicing attorney, and she is fighting the state of California to allow her to die with dignity. Christy, thank you so much for staying with us. So it takes a while for obviously these bills to be passed, and you know, do you have plans to move if the timing doesn't work for you?
No, my daughter and I had that option early on to move, but I made a decision. My daughter was willing to do it, but I made a decision as a mom that I was not willing to uproot her from her best friends here in Santa Clarita, take her out of her home, take her away from her college and make her reestablish in a new state, nor to take her out of her job. You know, as you all know, she's 20 years old and has a great full-time job with benefits. I wasn't going to ask her to come with me to Oregon and be by herself when I was facing death. I mean, that would have been the most cruel and unselfish thing or selfish thing that I think I could have done to my kid.
It's just amazing that absolutely as a mother, you know, even in your final, you know, days that you are thinking about your child, you know, that it's your child's future, it's your child. And not only that, but you are advocating for so many others who may feel the same way. So how does it work with, like, I mean, Brittany was very vocal about her timing and certain symptoms and when they appeared. And I mean, at this point, with it being against the law, I mean, what is your personal plan?
Well, my personal plan is that I've publicly spoken out, and I stand by this. You know, I've spent over a decade, you know, giving my blood, sweat, and tears to upholding the law with LAPD. I then spent another decade as a civil rights attorney doing the same thing. So I'm not in my last breath going to break the law, but that is the reason for the lawsuit, is to essentially, you know, sue the state of California and the highest law enforcement officers in the state, essentially asking them to find that this is not unconstitutional and not to try to put, you know, any doctor who would be willing to prescribe this to me in jail for a felony.
Right.
I mean, I'm so proud of some cities and municipalities like the city of Los Angeles, County of Ventura, that have come out publicly and said, you know what, in our cities, we're not going to enforce this. We stand behind Senate Bill 128, and I very much hope that the city of Santa Clarita, being very progressive, will do that soon.
Well, let me ask you a question. So this week, the California Medical Association altered its position on the bill, right? So they went from being opposed to it to a neutral stance. Does that? I would imagine that would help.
Does it send a message?
Absolutely, because, the opponents to this particular Senate bill and to aid in dying have always argued that, medically this was too dangerous, that it could have set a precedent. But when the California Medical Association, they are now no longer opposed to the bill, but they're not just neutral, arguably, because the head of the California Medical Association has come out publicly and stated in quotes that this decision of aid in dying is a personal decision between a doctor and a patient. So while they may not be using the word advocating, they've essentially said exactly what we've been saying. This is a personal decision.
Right. Well, I love the support you're getting, but with support always comes opposition, obviously. And sometimes those are the voices that we hear the loudest. So to those people that have been opposing this, they say that, allowing this act to go through would leave others exposed or vulnerable to being taken advantage of. And it says something to medical bills and skyrocketing medical bills when we're trying to lower. But I mean, to me, it all sounded like a bunch of BS. But what do you say to those people that are opposing what you're trying to do?
Well, before I decided to speak out, I mean, obviously then as an attorney, I'm used to sort of dealing with the pros and cons of every single situation. In this particular case, I, like you, don't find that any of the opponent's arguments hold water.
Right.
I've heard the argument that that if the aid in dying bill passes or my lawsuit were to be granted, there would be an epidemic of suicides. Frankly, there's absolutely no evidence of that. It's been over 17 years that death with dignity has been lawful in Oregon. If there was an epidemic of suicides, we would see it on the front page of the paper.
Absolutely.
It hasn't happened.
Right.
The other oppositions clearly are that insurance companies will start to deny services. I would dare anyone to find a single terminally ill patient where insurance companies have not already denied services, and it's already happened to me. I went through 2 extra months of chemo, suffering when I wouldn't have had to do that if my insurance company had actually approved the scans that my doctor needed 2 months earlier.
Right.
So, and other arguments like it's unsafe for the medication to be able to come to your home. Well, I have, my pain medications that are Schedule I narcotics currently being sent to my home. There are already state and federal laws to protect those types of things. And as a civil rights attorney protecting the rights of disabled and elders, if I thought for 1 second that there was any more danger with this, I will be honest with you, and that I wouldn't advocate for this.
Right. It sounds, clearly you've done your research and you've lived your life. You walk the walk when it comes to rights and the law. And, I have nothing but respect. And while our show is called Broadscast and we have our silly shtick of broads and what a broad is. What a broad is someone who stands up for what is right and stands and leads with her heart and leaves a legacy. And you are absolutely all of that. And you are our broad of the week. And we absolutely are so grateful that you share your story here with us. And we have a little gift we're going to send you. But
you're too kind, and I'm just, I have listened to your show in the past, and I'm so proud of everything that, you guys have done, and honestly giving, and being objective about all of these topics, because it's only through true informed debate that people can make informed decisions in this country. So I appreciate both of you.
But thank you, Christy. I also, as someone who gets to do advocacy work, I know that what you're doing is selfless and tireless and often underappreciated. So from all of us that are behind you, we're supporting you and wishing you well. And I don't mean to get emotional, but thank you for what you're doing for us.
Thank you. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, Christy.